So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Paralever on my GSPD. I thought I would have it back together sooner than this, but I had a bit of a dance around with installing the drive shaft boot this afternoon. I had not intended to take the drive shaft out or the swing arm out, but I actually found a tear in the boot under here. Something had flown up and hit it, and even though the boot itself was in good condition, I thought, seeing as how that's where all the crap gets in and it's a dry shaft, I thought I better replace it. So, like always, and this is a lesson for everybody, I took the swing arm out. It's a fairly easy process. You undo 4 flange bolts in here, lock nuts here, which are torqued to about 70 foot-pound, and then the pins, suspension, of course, the radius arm and the shock absorber. And the arm comes out fairly easily. I already had the final drive off, as you may remember from the video that I did the other day. And when I went to put it back, common sense said to me, take the seat off, take the battery out, take the carrier out, and life will be much simpler. Well, I didn't do that. I thought I'd fiddle around and it would be much quicker if I just had to fiddle for a few minutes. In actual fact, that rule is never true. So if you're working on your bike and you've got to take some things apart to get clear and proper access to the bike, do it. Don't talk yourself out of it because you don't feel like it, because ultimately you'll pay the price. And in the end, I couldn't get the flange boot on. This back one popped off while I was stuffing around, so I had to take the whole thing out again, and then I took the battery out and I put the whole lot back in about half an hour. So there's a lesson for everybody, not just people who do it all the time. But that's not what I am doing this video for. I did a video the other day about the Paralever pin bushes that I had to send back that were experimental, and these are the new ones now fitted up in the bike. Now I'm not going to do the whole tension wrench thing here. What I'm trying to do is show some people who asked how to set these up, because on the other side, which is around here, there is the big pivot pin, which, as you can see, is still just sitting proud at the moment. Now that, according to the manual, gets torqued up to about 110 foot-pound, and that'll tell you how much stress and strain that takes and how little you can afford to have that pin work in the alloy housing. Normally I put green Loctite on there, and I'm not going to do that in this video because I'm really just trying to show you how to set these pins and bushes up if you are of a mind to buy them. So I'm not trying to do the final finished job. I'm just trying to show you how to do it. Now you can see that pin on the other side there is loose, and I did that so that you can see that that's what happens if they aren't torqued and set correctly. They're a bush, not a bearing, so there's no preload on them. They rely on a close tolerance in the bush, good lubrication and a proper setup, and you want to set them up so that there's no side play, none of this side play, because it'll hammer the backside out of the bearing bushes inside. But you also want to set it up so that it's not tight. You don't preload it like a roller bearing. So why I've left that bush on the other side loose was so I could get enough of this so you could see what I was actually talking about. Now I'm going to try and do this. I'm going to turn this, pause it for a second, and I'll be back. So I've just tightened the bush on the other side down until it's home. It's not torqued, but it is home to the all intents and purposes to the point where it is properly seating into that pivot now. And this is how you adjust it. It comes with a lock nut here in this bag, and two little bungs for bunging up the grease nipple holes. So that nut goes on there, right, and that's the lock nut. Now the trick is this hex here and the pivot I showed you on the other end of it in the video the other day, it goes home to the bottom of a blind bush, right, which is now made out of steel and which I've greased very finely with moly grease, cleaned everything spotlessly and cleaned the threads down so I can Loctite them when I'm finished. Squeeze the grease out of the bush by pushing the pin home and allowing it to come up through the grease nipple hole. So that what I want these to do is I want them to go home and seat and then just nip. So you want the chamfered rounded ends of the pins just barely kissing the end of the hole in the bush. So that will stop any lateral movement but still allow it to rotate on the pin, and that will give you the kind of life that will make these actually worth buying. Now I'm going to try and do this on camera, I hope. So let's just try. So now what I'm doing is I'm just quietly, gently taking up the end play in this little bush here. It's got no grease in it. It nearly goes all the way into that lock nut, so I know now there, it's just happened then. So now this will still move very, very slightly sideways. So now I would much rather do this with a 3/8 drive spanner, but I haven't got an adapter. So that's just kissed the end of the bearing run now, just like there. And you just want to just have it nip, just touch it, and then the very slightest turn. I'm going to pause this again. So the reason I paused the video is to go and get this Allen key, which is a much more precise tool, and I can feel just when it goes home that other spanner is just too big and it's got too much inertia. You really don't want to have these rubbing. You don't want to have them with any kind of real preload on them. You want to have them just screwed down to the end of the bush and then just barely turn it into that bush so that it's kind of slipping against the end of the bush without having any ability to grab on it. So what you're really trying to do is stop the side float between the two pins while still allowing the back, this part here, which is the main reason they have paralevers, to rotate around those pins, located by this locating radius rod here, and the shock absorber of course up the top. And the eagle eyes in those of you will just notice when I did that shock absorber is missing its bump stop rubber. It has just disintegrated in the last couple of days. So it's going to get the standard shock put back on it before I take it off and go down to Rad shock absorbers down on the south side and have a refresh and a resurface and one thing and another. It's a white power shock and I do like it very much, but sometimes it can be a bit problematic. So there you go. Little bit of a story, little bit of a thing. This, when it's on, I Loctite that thread too, and of course you have to heat those and kill the Loctite with heat before it'll undo. And this lock nut, this inside here on a bearing, if you're putting it in a needle roller bearing, it only gets torqued up to about 4 or 5 foot-pound. You do it with an inch-pound torque wrench, and but this nut here, this lock nut, it goes down to about 70 or 77 foot-pound. So the lock nut and the home pin on the other side both have very high torque values to lock those pivots very tightly, because you can just imagine the kind of shock load that they are taking. Anyway, I thought I'd take the trouble just to show you that. I've had a bit of a harassing day that I caused myself, but it's my fault, and at my age I should have learned better by now, but I learn new things every day. Stay well, ride safely, we'll talk again soon.